Hi, kids. Socrates here. Just wanted to let you know, when you're doing your banking in America, don't forget to stop in to Satan's Federal Savings and Loan. We really do treat you like hell. Just call 1-800-666-666-666-666-666-666-666. Yeah, you get the picture over there, okay. And don't forget, you get a free toaster when you open an account with your everlasting soul. And you know, let's face it, if Satan was going to start a business, it would be a bank. Come in next month for our Lake of Fire sale. Remember, FDIC, find devil in closet. Kids, bunch of kids.
The topic of the day is free speech.
Free speech is a very interesting topic because you think it's going to have something to do with just the Western world, but it actually has something to do with human beings and the different situations they find themselves culturally. Whether they're in a hunting-gathering group, how does free speech work in that, in the, say, in South America? Or if they're in a more advanced group like the industrial nations. Or if where we started in the Western world, it was the Greeks. And they started oratory, free speech, they started theater. All of that was could be done only by essentially the males. If you were a slave, if you were a woman, you didn't have that same access to free speech that the citizens of Athens had in Athens, Greece. The uniqueness of that, though, was that at other cultures around the world, say one of their biggest nemesis, the Persian Empire, if you didn't say what the emperor wanted you to say, you had your head cut off. You could be tortured to death. You could be put in dungeons for the rest of your life. So, free speech didn't work in places where there were monarchies. And so it was something that the Greeks, actually gave to us as far as our culture is concerned. And today, different places in the world practice different kinds of free speech. But in other places, think about free speech in Germany during World War II. You weren't allowed to say anything. You were in prison for anything you said. And that was in, the 1930s, 1940s. So free speech has a very interesting history. And I kind of like that in America today because in the Constitution, one of the things they had in the Constitution was that you had the right to free speech. And that was because where they were coming from, in the monarchy in England, you didn't have that right. You didn't have the same kind of rights that you had in America. So they actually fought for that. They put it in their Constitution, and that was a very important thing. And we still try and maintain that today.
Along those lines, where do you think free speech is in the United States today?
Okay, I have to go back a little bit in history, believe it or not, back to Henry VIII.
Sure.
Because Henry VIII, when he wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon, the Pope wouldn't let him do it. And so he broke away from the Catholic Church and started his own church, the Anglican Church. And he was the head of that church. Bump it up to Pilgrim times. If you did not agree, or if you didn't go to church on Sunday, you were fined £9. That was the equivalent of $19,000 back then, back around the time of the Pilgrims. So, and if you didn't go to church, you were not only against the church itself, but you were against the king, who was the head of the church. So you were against the state and the religion. So to get away from that and have freedom of religion, people like the Quakers and the Pilgrims and the Puritans, they came to the United States so they could have more freedom of speech within the confines of their religion, because they were actually put to death for it even. They were even burned at the stake for talking, against the church in England. So in America, we had this free speech. Now, as the colonies, coalesced and all that kind of thing, we became the United States of America, and they wrote the Constitution about free speech. They still only meant it for white landowners. And slaves couldn't vote or didn't have free speech. Women didn't really have free speech. And so all those things had to slowly, in our process, be fought for. And, women didn't get to vote until 1920. That's a form of free speech when you can't even vote. That's, what are you saying to people? So it's been this ongoing process. And I know that, one of the things that happened in the 60s against the Vietnam War were all these people finally rising up and, practicing free speech against their government. I was one of them. I actually had an underground paper at Purdue University in 70 and 71, and I was allowed to put almost anything I wanted in that paper. I could hardly believe what we could get away with. And so, that free speech is what we fight for today. But today it's for everybody, not just for the white guys that own property. So, free speech and its history in the Americas.